In the twilight of Rome, when marble shadows stretched across blood-stained streets, a single truth echoed through the heart of an empire. Power does not fall quietly. And on the day the dictator dropped to his knees, pierced by the very hands he once trusted, the Republic did not cheer, tremble. For in destroying the man they feared, Rome awakened forces far darker than his rule ever was. There are moments in history when the world seems to hold its breath, when the sky darkens not because of clouds, but because an age itself is preparing to end. Rome knew such a moment. And it began long before blades were drawn in the Senate, long before a dictator fell to the cold marble floor. It began in a city drowning in its own brilliance, a civilization too powerful to fail, yet too fractured to stay. The streets of Rome were once symbols of honor, carved by men who believed a republic could outlast the weaknesses of its citizens. But ideals fade when hunger rises, when corruption breeds in the bones of the powerful, when greed becomes the language of politics. And so the republic that had conquered nations now struggled to govern itself. Into this chaos walked a single man. He did not rise like a hero from myth. He rose like a storm, slow, gathering force, gathering followers, gathering the weary souls of a nation tired of speeches and hungry for results. Rome needed order, and he carried order like a sword at his side. His ascent was not a miracle. It was a response, a desperate answer to years of political decay, broken promises, and the endless ambitions of men who wore honor on their tunics but treachery in their hearts. The Republic had become a battlefield of voices, loud, divided, directionless. And the people looked to the one man who did not shout, but acted. He took the reins where others hesitated. He crushed rebellions others had allowed to fester. He rebuilt systems others had profited from destroying. He imposed discipline where the Senate had offered only debate. And with every victory, every reform, every issue, he seized and solved. The people saw less of a man and more of a savior. But salvation always comes at a price. When he walked through the forum, the crowds parted with reverence. When he spoke, they listened, some in admiration, others in fear. The Senate looked upon him as a reminder of their failures, a mirror reflecting their weaknesses. For while they argued over laws, he enforced them. While they clung to tradition, he embraced change. While they hid behind procedure, he moved with purpose. And Rome, hungry, hurting Rome, chose him. They chose the firmness of one hand over the trembling hands of many. They chose the certainty of a single voice over the discord of 100 bickering senators. They chose the leader who could steady the Republic, even if it meant bending the very rules that once defined it. But the rise of a necessary tyrant leaves footprints across the soul of a nation. For every man who praised him, another whispered in fear. For every reform he passed, a senator lost influence. For every victory he achieved, old traditions cracked under the weight of its authority. Power, once concentrated, does not like to be shared. And this man had gathered more than any leader since the dawn of the Republic. He did not intend to become a tyrant. Tyranny is rarely born from malice. It is born from necessity, from crisis, from a people who would rather kneel to one strong figure than crumble under the weight of countless weak ones. And so the Republic watched, torn between relief and terror, as the storm grew into something greater than a man, into a force. A force that held Rome together while slowly tearing the Senate apart. His rise was not the beginning of tyranny. It was the beginning of the end. Not because he seized too much power, but because Rome had handed it to him willingly. Long before the conspirators sharpened their knives, they called it unity. They pretended it was loyalty. But beneath the polished marble floors of the Senate, beneath the togas wrapped in dignity and deception, there lived something far older and far more dangerous, fear. Not the kind that shakes a soldier on the battlefield, nor the kind that trembles in the heart of a child. No, this was the fear of powerful men watching their power slip through their fingers like sand. It was the fear of shadows growing longer, of influence fading, of a republic that no longer bowed to their voices, but to his. They greeted him with smiles, broad, glittering, rehearsed. They flattered him with honors, festivals, parades, and titles. Every gesture of praise was a mask, and behind each mask, crack, for they knew what he was becoming. More importantly, they knew what they were no longer. To the people, he was the steady hand that steadied Rome. To the legions, he was the commander who always led from the front. But to the Senate, he was a reminder of everything they feared losing: their respect, their relevance, their control. You see, power has an arrogance of its own. Those who possess it believe it is eternal. Those who lose it believe they have been robbed. The senators felt both angry at the world for changing, angry at him for succeeding, angry at themselves for not being the leaders Rome needed. And so they hid behind tradition like children, hiding behind a curtain. That he was too strong. They whispered that he was too strong. They whispered that he was too beloved. They whispered that no single man should carry so much authority. But what they whispered in private, they denied in public. For no one confronts a storm while standing alone in the open. The man they feared walked among them with calm assurance, unaware of, or perhaps indifferent to, the bitterness settling in their hearts. The more he acted, the more they talked. The more he achieved, the more they plotted. Every reform he pushed forward was another reason to resent him. Every victory another reason to fear him. Because fear grows fastest in those who feel powerless. They held meetings late in the night, doors shut, lamps dimmed, voices hushed. The kind of meetings where men speak of saving the Republic, yet dream only of saving themselves. They convinced one another that the danger was not their ambition, his. That the threat was not their corruption, but his influence. That they painted themselves as guardians of liberty, while plotting to do the one thing liberty fears most, silence the man the people trusted. It is a strange thing how the defenders of freedom often become its greatest enemies, and so the Senate divided itself into two, those who worshipped him for strength and those who envied him for it. Every salute, every oath, every word of praise became another thread in a tapestry of deception. They clapped for him in the forum, yet clenched their teeth when he turned his back. They toasted his victories, yet poisoned their words with doubt behind wine-soaked curtains. They stood by his side during ceremonies, yet counted the steps to walk behind him on the day he would fall. The fear behind their smiles was not simply fear of the man. It was fear of being forgotten. For in Rome, the greatest punishment was not exile, but irrelevance. They believed the Republic was slipping away from them. They believed he was the reason. They believed blindly, desperately, that removing him would restore balance. But the truth is simpler and darker. They were not defending the Republic from a dictator. They were defending their fading pride from the man who proved how weak they truly were. There are days in history that feel ordinary, days that pass like whispers, unnoticed by time. And then there are days carved into the bones of humanity, days when the air itself seems to know that something irreversible is about to happen. Rome awoke to such a day. The sun rose without warmth, its light falling like pale dust over the city. Merchants opened their stalls, soldiers tightened their armor, citizens carried on with their routines, unaware that the fate of the Republic walked among them. And the man at the center of it all, he felt none of the danger circling him like wolves in the dark. For greatness often carries a terrible flaw. It trusts too easily. He believed Rome loved him too much to betray him. He believed the Senate would honor him as he had honored them. He believed that the men who shook his hand had no daggers hidden behind their backs. But history is cruel to the noble-hearted. As he approached the Senate chambers, the crowd parted as they always did. Some reached to touch his robe, believing it brought luck. Others stepped aside out of respect. And a few out of fear. His stride was calm, steady, the stride of a man who had survived wars, storms, conspiracies, and chaos itself. What he did not know was that the real war waited inside. In that chamber, the conspirators gathered like shadows stitched together. Their faces were solemn, their expressions rehearsed, their hearts thundering with a blend of conviction and terror. Every man believed he played the role of savior. Every man convinced himself that this act, this brutal, irreversible act, was the sacrifice Rome needed. But beneath the noble speeches they had told themselves, another truth pulsed. No man raises a blade for the Republic alone. Men raise blades for fear, for envy, for the dread of losing control. When he entered the room, the senators rose in unison. It should have been a gesture of honor. Instead, it was a ritual before the storm. Their togas rustled like the wings of carrion birds. Their eyes flickered with guilt, with panic, with resolve. He walked toward them without hesitation, because betrayal is most effective against those who do not expect it. They encircled him gently at first, like friends welcoming a brother, but the circle tightened. Fingers twitched, breaths trembled, hands slid beneath robes where cold steel waited. Each conspirator looked to the next, hoping someone else would begin, someone else would dam the walls. And then, with a single motion, the first blade flashed. It was not a heroic strike. It was not clean. It was clumsy, desperate, a man's trembling hand striking at a legend. The dictator staggered back, his eyes wide, not with pain, but disbelief. In that instant, he did not see enemies. He saw men he had trusted, men he had protected, men he had elevated. The second blade followed, then the third, and then the room collapsed into chaos. They swarmed him like a storm of iron and pan. Blades stabbed downward in frantic arcs, each man desperate to leave his mark, to play his role in the murder they called salvation. The marble floor darkened beneath him. The chamber echoed with the grunts of cowards pretending to be heroes. He clutched at one senator's robe, not to save himself, but to understand. Why? Why had Rome turned its knives inward? In his final moments, he learned a bitter truth. It was not his tyranny they feared. It was his greatness. With his fall, the chamber grew silent. The conspirators stepped back, trembling, soaked in the blood they believed would cleanse the Republic. But as they looked down upon the man they had slain, they realized too late. They had not saved Rome. They had wounded it, and the wound would not close. It would bleed into war, into vengeance, into empire.